Hello shopkeepers and do-it-yourselfers out there in YouTube land. Working on this 2017 Chevy Trax with a 1.4 turbo. Got a coolant leak. I've already got the water pump and all that apart, but I'm going to show you how it is to take it apart. It's not much at all. It's not much at all. But anyway, I'll guide you through the points and tell you what it is that you have to get it done. Underneath the car, here on the right front side, of course this was already broke. You can see it had been ground off. Right up there is the radiator drain plug. Just kind of get your hand up there and twist that out, and it drains out right there. And then leave it open and let it drain good. Get that Dex kill out of there. And then you'll want to take and jack up the engine a little bit. Now, fellas, be careful on these aluminum pans. You will break them if you're not careful. Don't put your jack in the middle of the pan. You want to keep it. Well, the guy that designed that magnet on that flashlight is sure strong. Don't put it right in the middle of the pan because it'll break it. I've got it right on the corner. And you don't have to jack the car up with the engine. You just want to jack it up about 5 inches of lift, pushing up on the car a little bit, and then stop, and we'll go back up top. So then you need to take your air filter housing out of the way. I like to take apart as little as possible, so I left that clamp tight. Just took that clamp loose, used a 7mm socket, took that clamp loose and pulled the pipe up off the turbo cold air inlet, and disconnected the mass airflow sensor connector, left the lid on the filter housing because it just kind of presses into a rubber grommet there and two there. The one grommet goes in here and the other two go there on the fender well, and that whole assembly come out, sit right there on the floor out of the way. And then this goes right here, and of course one of the grommets came out with it. Put that back in. Put that back in the body. Radiator core support, so they're ready to go. That's all out of the way. And then you need to take the engine mount off, and that's why, fellas, that's why you have to jack the engine up. Because if you don't, when you take these 3 bolts out, the engine will fall, and that won't be good. So you take these 3 nuts off. These are all 15mm. 1, 2, 3 bolts. And if you've jacked it up right, when you take these 3 bolts off, actually it might raise up just a little bit, or the engine might fall just like a 1/4 inch or so. Then you've done it just about right. Set all this out of the way. And then you've got this bracket here that you got to get out of there. And there's 3 bolts that hold it. They're 15mm as well. One there, there, and there. You can get all this from the top, and just once you get the bolts broke loose, I found that they came out real easy, just my fingertips. And those 3 bolts are all the same length, 15mm head, and that's kind of a little bit tricky to get out. Kind of wiggle it up a little bit and pull the bolt out, and kind of twist it around that way and pull the bolt out. I made the bottom bolt fall out by turning it that way, and then picked it up off the ground. Got this out. Might be easier to take the water pump pulley off to get that bracket out of there. But to take the water pump pulley off, you need a, what's the size of the torx? It's a 10. It's an E10. E10 fits your water pump. Now that's the water pump bolts. The water pump pulley what is that, an E12. That's an E12. And then for your tensioner, that is they don't make these for old men to read. Looks like an E14. An E14. So you stick your E14 on that pulley. Let's get the light out of the way down there. Got it on the pulley, and then you're going to pull it clockwise, and that'll compress that tensioner so you can get the belt off. And but loosen these bolts before you take your belt loose, and then you can take them right out. Then you've got a bunch of, like I say, these are all E10 that go around your water pump, and there are three different lengths of bolts in the water pump. So when you take them out, a handy way to do it would be to have your new water pump laid up here like that pulley. And when you take a bolt out here, put the bolt in right there, take the bolt out there, put the bolt right, you know, and so forth. And then when you get the new water, or the old water pump off, set it up here and take the bolts from there to there, from there to there, from there to there, from there to there, and so forth. And then you've got to get your thermostat housing off. Well, these three bolts that go in the thermostat housing, they're also the E10 torx bolts. And if you don't know what a torx bolt is, that's a torx bolt. Anyway, pull this snap ring out, and you'll see it stops. And let's see if I can get it. Stops in that little groove right there. When you get that pulled out, you can wiggle this hose connector off of the thermostat housing. Take your coolant temperature sensor connector off. Right here, there's a little that little red connector lock protector. Pull it upward, and then that little tab right there, you squeeze it in. Right there, you squeeze it in and pull it up. You can leave the thermostat housing on the water pump and take it out that way, but there's a hose back here connected to it. Now I don't want to take that off, but getting to these three bolts that hold that thermostat housing onto the water pump was kind of tricky. So I wanted to go ahead and pull the hose off, get the water pump down, and then I used my E10 to get those three bolts out of the thermostat housing with the water pump loose. So it was much more accessible. And your water pump has 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 bolts. Like I say, there's 3 different lengths. Here's 3 long ones, or no, 2 long ones and 1, 2, 3 medium ones, and the rest of them are all short, and they're all the same length. So obviously the short ones will only go in one spot because they won't grab threads, but make sure you get your bolts back in the right place. And this water pump was leaking through the seal here, and pressure tested. See, I pressure tested. I was a good boy. And it leaked right out of this housing where this little I suppose that's aluminum. That aluminum plug is pressed in right there. It's coming out right there. And you have an aluminum gasket. It's got factory sealer on both sides. And get all that gasket material cleaned off of there good. And try not to gouge the metal if you're using razor blades or whatever, because you could create a spot where it might leak. And then when you're putting it back together, probably a good idea to take some brake cleaner and get all this antifreeze film off of your pulleys so it don't contaminate your belt and cause your belt to squeak. And your cam phase connectors, these are pretty expensive, so you want to be careful. And there's a connector lock protector there. Push it down, and then you can reach in there and with a small screwdriver or something and pry that lock away from this tab. There's a tab right there on that connector, and pull that down out of the way. That gives you a little bit more clearance. You don't have to, but you just be careful and know that that's fragile, and you don't want to break it because you're going to wind up replacing it, and that's another expense that you didn't have to have. And there's your thermostat. This is the time to replace it if you wish. And the seal that goes in there, it's not a gasket, it's a seal, and it's stuck to the housing. It should come with a new water pump, which I haven't gotten yet. It should be arriving here shortly. But anyway, when you put it back in, get all your bolts started in your water pump first. I would put the thermostat housing on first, and put your new seal in here, and new thermostat if that's what you're wanting to do. And then get these bolts put in, these 3 E10 torx bolts, and get them tightened up so you can move this around and have more room to work. And then when you put your water pump up there, get your bolts in, get them all in, and then just start going around and getting them snugged up. And then German torque specs, good and tight. Don't over torque them, boys. They're not large bolts. They're just like I don't know what that is. Maybe 6 or 7 millimeter bolts, like 1/4 inch bolts. So they'll snap easy. So they don't take but inch-pounds of torque. So just snug them up, and maybe 1/4 of a turn would be plenty. Use your head, boys. And when you're putting the air filter back in, take a little ball of spit, or a little ball of antifreeze, or a drip of silicone on there. Don't use oil, it ruins the rubber, but it'll make it a lot easier to get the air filter housing to drop in through those grommets. And get your coolant filled back up. Make sure you got all the air out of it. You'll be good to go. So I'm going to leave it for you. You're smart enough to do this. You're smart enough to finish it on your own. Have a good day, fellas. Thank you for watching. give us a like and subscribe.